whether it's innate or not, or whether we know it before birth. He thinks that's just a silly thing to argue about. But certainly it's nothing that requires reason to know.
And when we say reason, we should just keep in mind that we're thinking again of demonstrative, of making these demonstrations, these relations of ideas type demonstrations.
Well,
or analytic to use the jargon.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. That's a good point, Mark. He does say, that the interesting thing for him is that there is this power of the human mind to connect the past and the future, to remember to have experiences, to take them in, to remember them, and then to use some kind of power, so to speak, to connect the two and infer from things that are happening now as to what might happen in the future. He says that's the interesting thing, is that this is the way the human mind operates. There's nothing in experience that tells it to operate that way.
Right.
And you can't reason to that.
But also that there's nothing coming in through the senses. There's no sense for causality, right? It's not like there's a causality comes in the same way color comes in, if you can even speak of coming in. Yeah. Or in other words, there's no empirical object cause, or with gravity, we don't see some other third thing that's standing in between the planets, that we're not seeing the cause. And even if we could, of course, we would run into the problem of the relationship between the cause and each of the items. So that's a serious problem. His skepticism is really, it undoes the way that most scientists would like to think about what they're doing. They would like to think, they want to think that everything's empirically based, but they also want to think that causality is in some sense real, right? Gravitation is something out there and it's real, whereas for Hume, you just get these sets of correlations between some event and some other event, some idea and some other idea, and the force, if you could even call it that, is not out there in the world, it's in the mind. It's custom. Mm-hmm. So it's not gravity, it's custom. You see these relations, but you have no real grounds for saying that they're going to continue on in the future. And you can say that even if there's a mechanism, right? So you may think, well, there's some mechanism to gravity which is undiscovered, so we might explain it in terms of, say, propagations through the ether or something like that. But it doesn't matter how far you drill down. Even if you reduced everything to the ultimate subatomic particles and explained all the higher phenomena based on those lower level mechanisms, you still be left with these relationships between different subatomic particles and electrons and the nucleus and all that stuff, where those relations, which you might want to call, there's a real force out there between them. Well, that force is invisible and will always remain invisible and will not be something that comes in through the senses. All that will come in through the senses is the different positions, let's say, of the particle at different times.
Just one of the things you mentioned was, so he calls this custom as what tells us that there's causality, or that explains somehow why we perceive things as causal. But he makes it really clear that he's just using the word custom just kind of as a label for this is what we do. It's not like, because when I hear that term, I think of like, oh, your elders tell you to do it. It's just, this is the way that it's done. But it really shouldn't have any of that kind of attachment to it at all. It's just, this is just how the mind works.
It's not going to be, there's not going to be a different
so
custom.
You could call it instinct, or you could call it psychology, or you don't have to use the word custom at all.
Yeah, that's a good point. And one of the things that I think is interesting that we can talk about